James Ernest, Gruel & Truth, Radio Network, here with wrestling legend Sgt Slaughter.
Ted Hutt. Okay, at ease. Carry on.
So, Sarge, what are you currently up to?
Well, I am the ambassador for World Wrestling Entertainment, the WWE, which keeps me pretty busy going around the country promoting the WWE pay-per-views and televisions and live events. Do a lot of radio, television, newspaper reporting, and still watch the show every week. Once in a while, I show up at a live event and watch, and part of my job is to report on what I think and what I want to change in the shows or give my input, and always looking out there for some new talent to take the place of us veterans.
Nice. So, in other words, you still have an impact on the show today, and your opinion is appreciated. It sounds great.
Yes. It's great to see some of the talent that you discovered being so part of the sports entertainment business these days.
Exactly. I mean, it's so nice to see a lot of the young talent that was in NXT a couple of years ago up on the main roster.
Yes, we had a company there in Louisville for a while, and of course that was NXT, and now it's moved on to Florida. But we just can't believe how well it's grown and how fast it's grown.
Nice. So tell us about how you got your start in the business.
Well, I got started. I was still in the Marine Corps. Went home for on a leave, and a friend of mine who I used to go to a lot of wrestling matches with called me, and we went out for lunch, and he said the next day he was going to do a story on the pro wrestling training camp. Would I like to go along? And I said, yeah, I would like to do that. So I ended up going to this training camp, and when I walked in, I saw that about 5 or 6 of the new trainees were young guys that I wrestled in high school, and I used to beat them all the time, and I started watching it and got to thinking, well, maybe if they can do this, maybe I should try it. And next thing I know, they called out my name, more or less for a volunteer, and being in the Marine Corps and the DI, I knew what volunteer meant. That meant I was in trouble. So I got in the ring, and they put some holes on me, and of course I had to tap out on most all of them, and I went to get out of the ring, and the trainer, one of the trainers, Fern Gagne, asked me where I was going, and I said, well, I didn't see any reason to stay in the ring any further, because they were taking advantage of me. And he said, taking advantage of you? I said, yeah, I'm letting you put these holes on me. And he said, well, you're letting us put the holes on you? I said, yeah. He said, well, you think you could do any better? And I said, well, I think I could probably do better than what I'm doing. So he told me to get down in the wrestling position, so I got down on my hands and knees. And he called out a wrestler by the name of Rick, and as soon as I heard Rick's name, I knew I was in good shape, because I used to beat Rick all the time in high school wrestling. And I heard Rick yell out, I got a bad shoulder, coach. He said, get on him. I don't hear any excuses. So I ended up pinning Rick, which wasn't real good for Rick or the other trainees there, and kind of embarrassed the coach. So, of course, Rick was Ric Flair of today, and so then they put me in up against Capatera, and I escaped from him, and so they got another professional wrestler who come in by the name of Billy Robinson, and he told me to get down in the wrestling position. When I did, he proceeded to try to break my leg for me as he dropped his shin against the back of my ankle. So I came up fighting, as they say, in the mud, the blood, and the beer, and took pretty good advantage of him, and he had to break us apart. Took me out outside of the camp, and Vern Gagne, the main trainer, said, where'd you learn to fight like that? And I said, well, high school wrestling. And he said, well, you must have learned something more than that. You weren't just wrestling out there. And I said, well, I'm in the Marine Corps. He goes, well, I was in the Marine Corps. He said, if you think about wanting to become a professional wrestler, we'd like to have you. So the following year, I decided not to re-enlist or up my time in the Marine Corps, and went into professional wrestling full time.
The way I understand it, you were, along with the wrestling, you were a solid high school football player.
Yes, I was a football player. I was my most valuable player of my football team, my high school football team, both my junior and senior year, and I was a lineman. So we had a pretty good team, just not a real big team, and never really got any scholarship offers because we were such a small school, and so I decided to go in the Marine Corps, and thought I'd try college later, but of course I never got there, and I've been doing professional wrestling ever since.
Starting out with the NWA and AWA, what was the biggest
Yes.
difference between the two of those?
AWA and NWA were pretty basically the same type of wrestling, just used different talents, kind of like a baseball team. They trades. There'd be a wrestler in the AWA that the NWA wanted. They kind of make trades and things like that. But then when I got to the WWF, which was WWWF at that time, that was a whole different. That was the major leagues then, and made it a lot more harder to make yourself a living. But if you did it the right way, which I did, I did pretty well with it.
And then in those early days, the way I understand it, you had two of the greatest managers of all time fight over your services, Lord Alfred Hayes and Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Yes, two of the greatest. Two of the greatest. Rest their souls. They both took a liking to me, and it got to be a kind of a battle between the two of them, and they ended up getting in the ring and fighting it out a few times. And at the time, I was wrestling a Super Destroyer Mark II under a mask, and I put Sgt Slaughter in the mothballs for a little while because the AWA promoter and a trainer there, Gagne, wanted a masked man. And he had one, but he didn't like him, and he wasn't getting along with him, so they asked me if I would consider taking his place. And of course, he had a whole different type of name, and he was wrestling in all the main events. So when I came in, it was a little bit tough for me because everybody admired him because he was anti-establishment, more or less. And so when I came in, I was kind of looked down at, but it just took a little while, and people saw that I was a pretty good hand and pretty good wrestler, and pretty good guy, and it was pretty much history.
Going into the WWF, or add another W in there, you had that challenge, that Cobra Clutch challenge.
Yes, did the Cobra Clutch challenge when I first went in, and nobody had ever seen the Cobra Clutch or me, Sgt Slaughter. So when I went in there, the first time I went in, I didn't wrestle. They just had us do a promo, and I did it with my boss of today, Vince McMahon, and his father was running the company at that time, and he brought me into New York, Allentown, Pennsylvania. He wanted me to do a promo, see what kind of a promo I did, and so I'd never met his son, Vince, before, so he said, just go out there and do a promo with my son. I want to see how you sound. Anything I can do to help you get everything situated. I went into my bag and I brought an old cassette tape out. And he said, what's that? And I said, that's music. Would you play that? He goes, well, we've never used music before, but let me see, what is it? And I said, it's a Marine Corps hymn. So he said, okay. So he came back and he said, okay, they're ready for you. They're going to play that music and then you can go out. So as I waited for the music to play, as I went to walk out, he kind of stood in my way, and you see that he was listening to the reaction of the crowd because they never had music before. So he finally told me to go, and as I went out and blew my whistle and had my swagger stick and my campaign cover on and a cigar in my mouth, and gave everybody orders and called them pukes and slimes and maggots, and they'd never seen me before. And before I got to Vince to do the promo, they were coming over the railing. So I made a pretty good impression on him, I guess. And so as I made my way to Vince, as I said, we'd never met before, and we went to talk, and I said, "Shut your hole, puke. Nobody told you to talk. Who gave you permission to speak?" And so he was kind of flabbergasted by it. So I kept giving him orders, and I had heard through the grapevine that he was spending like $200 on a haircut at that time. So I ruffled up his hair, and I said, "Who cut your hair, Ray Charles?" And so I pretty much embarrassed him the whole while I was out there, and did the promo. But the one thing I didn't know at that time is he didn't like smoke too much. So I took a big puff of my cigar before I left, and I blew it in his face. And he turned purple and yellow and red, and was smoke coming out of his ears. And when I got back to the dressing room, a lot of the other wrestlers were kind of like looking at me and laughing and giggling, and figured I'd lost my job before I even started. So I went to sit down and take off my combat boots and the rest of my attire, and I heard Vince's father walk in. You could always tell when Vince's father was around because he had 4 quarters that he used to jingle in his hands, kind of a nervous thing for him. So I heard these 4 quarters walking around my chair, and finally I looked up at him, and he kind of motioned for me to follow him. So I followed him into the little kind of a closet area there, and he just kept walking around me, and he finally stood in front of me, and he pointed at me, and he said, "That's the greatest thing I've ever seen in professional wrestling." He said, "Even my son hates you. I got to get you to start right away."
That is
so
awesome.
I'm still working in AWA in Minneapolis, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll get a call put into there, but I need to have you." So that's kind of how I got to start in the WWF, and which is the WWE, of course, of today, and the Cobra Clutch Challenge started shortly after that. Nobody had ever seen the Cobra Clutch till the first night I wrestled Bob Backlund in Madison Square Garden, and I put him in the hold, and he couldn't quite get out of it. And so his manager, Arnold Skolin, said something to me, and I went over and said something to him, and he jumped up in the apron and didn't like what I was saying because he was a former Marine also. So as I latched the Cobra Clutch back on Bob, he jumped down from the apron and grabbed a chair and came in and hit me in the head with it, which got Bob disqualified. So it got to be a pretty good talk around the wrestling that Sgt Slaughter had beat Bob Backlund with the Cobra Clutch. So Vince came in and said, "We need to do something with that." And I said, "What about a Cobra Clutch challenge?" And he said, "Well, how do we do that?" I said, "Well, issue anybody that wants to try to get out of the Cobra Clutch, once I put it on them in the middle of the ring, if they get out of it, I'll give them $5,000. And he said, You'll do that?" And I said, "Yeah." So that's how the Cobra Clutch got started, the challenge.
Oh, wow. So, and then obviously both those two things that you innovated, the music going to the ring and the those type of challenges have definitely persisted on in wrestling. I mean, you can't imagine wrestling without entrance music nowadays. And then, of course, the challenges, like they've done the Master Lock and other challenges over the years that have sprung from your original challenge.
Yes. I look back at it and wonder, where we'd be today. I'm sure someone would have come up with ring music, but I was the first one to bring it into the WWE at that time. And it really got a great response, and more wrestlers started using it. And now, as you said, it's pretty much a given that you don't go out without ring music. And some wrestlers, that's about the best part of their whole match is their ring music. So, it's just something that I thought of, and it worked, and here it is today.
Just wondering, when they did a Cyber Sunday here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Gosh, probably 8-10 years ago, and it was between you, Dusty Rhodes, and Roddy Piper, who was going to be Ric Flair's tag team partner to win those tag titles.
Yes.
Wondered how legit was the vote?
How much what?
How legit? How honest was the vote? Was it kayfabe, or was it legitimately people did get to vote?
Oh, I'm not real sure. I heard different stories about that. That I had gotten quite a few votes, but they really kind of wanted Roddy Piper to be the partner, and it happened good for me because I had other bookings, and they were all going over to Europe right after that show. So it worked out fine for me that I didn't win, and even better for Roddy because when he was over in Europe, he ended up having finding out that he had cancer, and he'd been wrestling for several months, not even knowing he had it, but he was in a lot of pain, and so they sent him home and found out he had cancer and cured him of the cancer. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2015 of a blood clot, but some things happen for reasons.
Exactly. I mean, with that working out that way, them being able to extend his life, I mean, that was huge.
Yes, yeah, he could have passed away over there and not even known what the problem was if they hadn't done an autopsy. So luckily, he went to the doctor there, and they sent him home, and went to his other doctor, his doctor, and they found the cancer.
And then outside of wrestling, you're also, considered a pop culture icon with G.I. Joe. How did you get involved with them?
Well, I was on my second tour of duty with the WWE. I came back. I left as a villain, and I came back as a villain. And Vince's father and Vince and a couple other producers, we went out for a dinner, and as we sat around the table, talked about Sgt Slaughter returning, and Vince was so excited that I was back. He made a kind of a statement at the table that here's Sgt Slaughter, the greatest villain of all time, and I kept taking all the cheers and all the toasts and going around the table, and Sarge is the greatest villain of all time. And I said, well, if you think I'm a great villain, you ought to see me as a hero. And Vince said, what do you mean a hero? I said, well, you have the Iron Sheik wrestling here, and we never really got to punch Ayatollah Khomeini in the nose for all he did with the killing of the Marines at the embassy and the hostage situation and the Black Hawks going down and all the other situations that happened. And I said, why don't you let Sgt. Slaughter go against the Iron Sheik and get some payback? And everybody's going, yeah, that sounds great. And Vince's father said, no. Sarge can never be a hero. He's got to be a villain. And so I looked over at Vince, who was soon to be taking over the company. He winked at me, and later on came over to me and he said, don't worry about Pops. He said, I think we're going to go with that idea. And I said, oh, really? He goes, yeah. So about 3 weeks later, we were doing some TV tapings in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and he came up to me in the third hour and said, are you ready to do this? And I said, do what? And he said, be the hero. And I said, yes. I did the first taping as the villain. That was my kind of a return. And so the Iron Sheik went out in the second hour and did a promo. And then the third hour, he went out and wrestled. And Vince said, I'm not going to tell him or Blassie or he called him Ayatollah Blassie. And he said, I'm just going to have you go out and challenge him. And I said, okay. He said, I want the natural reaction from the Sheik and Blassie. So I was waiting, and the Iron Sheik his match and was kind of taking advantage of his opponent. And all of a sudden, my music played, and I looked at the monitor, and the Iron Sheik kind of stunned that he was hearing the Marine Corps hymn. And out I came, blew my whistle, and the fans, were kind of like not understanding what was going on. And then they kind of picked up on it, and it was, yeah, here comes the Sergeant and the Marines. And so we faced each other in the aisleway going back to the dressing room. And I told him if he wanted to fight somebody, I'd be the first guy in line. And we had some words, and they broke us apart. So I got into the ring and made sure his opponent was okay. And once I got him out of the ring, I grabbed a microphone, and the only thing Vince told me to do was give him my best General Patton promo. So I had about 5 minutes to think about what I wanted to say. So I started talking, and I ended the promo with declaring war on the Iron Sheik, and I said that there's one thing I've always done when I was a little boy in school, and Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts and the Marine Corps, and I started reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and everybody stood up on their chairs and lit their lighters and said the Pledge of Allegiance with me, and the rest is history.
That is the amazing thing, how you were able to, like you said, go from the biggest hero or biggest villain to the biggest hero. And then, of course, growing up, I'm 38. So growing up, I know you from the other way around, going from a huge hero to a huge villain.
Right. And after I had gone against the Iron Sheik for quite a while, a friend of mine who knew my attorney called him and said that he knew some people from Hasbro Toys that were interested in speaking to me about becoming the first living G.I. Joe character in their animated cartoon series and their action figure line, and wanted to know if I'd be interested in being the spokesperson and first living G.I. Joe. And of course I was elated. So I had a camouflage limo at that time, and we made our way to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. As soon as we got close to the building, I got my driver to get out, and we put the flags on the front fenders, and I told him to go around the block a few times. Pulled up right in front of the Pawtucket Hasbro headquarters, and by that time everybody kind of seen the camouflage limo, and people were coming out of different offices and buildings, and before I could go into the headquarters of Hasbro, there was a jam-packed crowd, and I looked in through the windows, and all these executives were just like little kids. They were jumping up and down and couldn't believe what was going on outside their building. So I walked in, and of course the same thing happened when I got in there. And it was pretty kind of I guess, like I said, they were all like little kids because they've been doing this for years as animation, and all of a sudden here's this real live person walking in. And so we had a brief meeting, and ended up ready to leave. And I said, well, just keep in mind that Sgt Slaughter, and I pointed at myself, I said, I'm the real G.I. Joe. And so then I saluted them. We walked out. About halfway back to Connecticut, my attorney and I decided to stop and have dinner, and he wanted to call his office and get his calls. And he said that Hasbro had already called and said they wanted to sign us up to a contract, so I did. And I went to Vince a few days later, and I told him I had a big surprise for him, and I thought it was going to be something that could really, help put the WWE in another type of zone with another crowd of children and with a G.I. Joe. And I told him the whole story, and he was really happy for me and shook my hand. He said, "That's great, Sarge, but I can't let you go to Hasbro." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, I just signed up a toy company, LJN, and it would be a conflict of interest if you're on with Hasbro and I got LJN. So he pretty much figured I would just say, "Oh, okay, no problem." But I didn't do that. I said, "Well, Vince, I could always be a wrestler. Can't always be a GI Joe, especially the first living GI Joe." And he kind of stopped his feet and said, "Well, if you want to go there, you can go, but you can't be here." And again, I think he thought I was, just going to stay with him. And so after a long thought and talking to my family, we decided that, as I said, I can always be a wrestler, can't be a GI Joe. So I gave my notice, and he wasn't too happy about that because he had just started working on WrestleMania 1, and it's going to be Hulk Hogan and I in the first one, and kind of changed his plans, and wasn't what he wanted. So we had a few problems, but I had to leave for the first 6 WrestleManias, and finally when I got released from my contract full time with Hasbro, I had written Vince a handwritten note about WrestleMania 6, which was Hogan and the Ultimate Puke, the Ultimate Warrior, and they had a good match. I expected a better match, but I told Vince it wasn't the match that I was writing to him about. It was his production. I thought his production was one of the greatest that I'd ever seen. So he called me back, and I was watching a NASCAR race one Sunday afternoon, and picked up the phone and said, "Sarge?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is Vince." And I said, "Oh, hey, Vince, how you doing?" We talked for a while. He said, "I see your contract's over with Hasbro." And I said, "Well, it's funny you should know that." And he said, "Well, I keep on top of things. I was wondering if you're ready to go back to work." And I said, "Yeah, I'm ready." And he said, "Well, come to my house tomorrow. I got an idea." I said, "Okay." So he was already working on WrestleMania 7 when WrestleMania 6 was only 2 weeks old. And he brought me into his library at his house and had this layout of the LA Coliseum, 104,000 capacity. Showed me the layout with the big screen TVs all around, and he said, "I want to sell this out with you and Hogan, and I want to know if you're ready to go back to work." And I said, "Yeah, I'm ready, but how are we going to make Hogan the villain?" And he just kind of stopped and looked at me, and he goes, "Hogan?" He said, No, Hogan's going to be the hero. I'm going to make you the villain." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, I thought you'd take G.I. Joe Sgt. Slaughter, the real American hero, and make him the real American hero, since he already had a head start with the Hasbro." And he said, "Well, I got this idea," and he started laying out the idea about me being an Iraqi sympathizer, saying that America was weak, and we let a little country like Iran or Iraq and Saddam Hussein rule the world, and we were weak, and I'm kind of like listening to it. And he said, "That's my idea." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, yeah, I think we could do it." And he said, "Well, you go home and talk to your family about it, because it could be a little rough." So as I was going back home, I knew I wanted to do it. So I talked to my family and my daughters and my wife, and dinner that night after they got home from school, and told them that I was going back to the WWE, and I was going to wrestle Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 7, and they were like, "Oh, Dad, Hulk Hogan's going to be a bad guy?" And I said, no, Dad's going to be the bad guy." And they couldn't understand it either, because they just seen me for 6 years being the real American hero. But so my wife just kind of looked at me and shook her head and said, "You're crazy. You can't do that." And I said, "Well, let's give it a try." So she said, "Well, you're the one that puts the bread on the table. You do what you think is best." So I called Vince and told him I was ready to go. So we started out real slow, bringing back Sgt. Slaughter. Took a little while because people had, as I said, see me on G.I. Joe for the last 6 years as a real American hero, and And before I left the WWE, I was a hero, and here I am coming back in a different frame of mind and different attitude. And so we went for it. And my wife said, "You're crazy. You're going to get killed out there." And I said, "Well, we'll see what goes on." So we were taking it nice and slow. And Randy Savage, the Macho Man, was wrestling the Ultimate Warrior. And while they were pretty much deep into their what we call a program, they were already getting into cage matches. Randy broke his hand or broke his wrist. So Vince called me and said, "We got to change of plans. Randy's got to be out for a while. I'm going to put you in his spot against the Ultimate Warrior." And I said, "Oh, wow, that is a big jump." So here I am all of a sudden. I got a Sensational Sherry as my manager, and I'm wrestling the Ultimate Warrior in all these cage matches and different types of matches. And, I wasn't in the shape I should have been, but I got in shape in a hurry. And then finally, Macho Man was well, and in Miami, Florida, for a Royal Rumble in 1991, he assisted on hitting the Ultimate Puke, the Ultimate Warrior, in the head with a scepter, and kind of busted him pretty wide open, and I dropped an elbow on him and won the world title. And so that night we were out doing promos for the next upcoming, because everything was changed, the new champion and everything. So we had to stay there till about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And one of the last promos that I was going to do, Gene Okerlund was doing a promo, and he had an earpiece in. And all of a sudden I heard him say, "What's going on? I can't believe it. Sgt Slaughter's out behind the Miami arena, and he's burning the American flag." And when I heard that, I just said, "What is he saying?" And then he said it again. So I just walked right in front of the camera, and I said, "Cut, cut, cut." And they're all like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "I'm not burning any American flag." I said, "I don't know." And here come Vince, and he said, what's going on?" I said, "Well, he just said I burned the American flag out behind the arena here." And he goes, "Oh, we're just saying you did." I said, "Well, no, you're not going to say I did. Whether people saw it or not, I'm not burning the American flag. And that's it. You can fire me whatever you want to do, but I'm not burning the American flag." So he said, "Okay, well, we'll redo this." So they redid the promo, and so I went to Vince later. I said, "Why don't we just take like Hogan's shirt, or take his posters and say that's Americana, and we'll burn that?" He goes, "Well, yeah, that's a pretty good idea." So after we had did that a couple times, he came to me later and said, "Yeah, you're right. We probably would have lost our sponsors and some TVs, saying that you burned the American flag." And I said, "Well, I just didn't think it was a good move." So he agreed. And as we further on, as we went, the next couple of days, I went to Philadelphia. And when I got there, I stopped to get some breakfast, and had my agent with me, and we couldn't get any service. It's kind of a mom and pop type place, and it's like 0700 in the morning, and finally I said to the waitress, "Can we get some service?" And she just kind of looked at me, and here come this guy out of the kitchen with a spatula in his hand, and walked over to me, and he pulled up the sleeve of his T-shirt, and it was the United States Marine Corps insignia tattooed on his arm. And he pointed at me, and he pointed at my agent, and he said, "He can eat, you're not." And I said, "Okay, fine." And so I told my agent, "I think we may want to go somewhere else to eat." So we got up and left, and we said our goodbyes. He got on the plane, and I went into the Spectrum at that time. And when I walked in, Jay Strombo, who was working as a road agent, came up to me and said, Sarge, have you spoken to your wife today? And I said, no, I haven't. And, of course, we didn't have cell phones then. He said, have you talked to Vince? And I said, no, I haven't talked to Vince either. And he said, well, you might want to give them a call. I said, well, is there something wrong? And he goes, oh, I don't think there's anything wrong, but you might want to give them a call. So I called my wife. I got a message machine and called Vince. And he said, hey, Sarge, you doing all right? I said, yep. I said, is there a problem? He said, well, have you spoken to your wife? And I said, no, I haven't spoken to her. He said, well, I took the liberty of calling her and asked her to leave your home for a few days. He said, we had someone call the wrestling office this morning threatening to kill you and your family and kill me and my family and blow up our homes and blow up our cars and blow up the wrestling office and their studio. So I thought I'd get a secret, not a secret service, but some guys to come over to your home and till you got back. And I said, oh, well, thank you. So I finally got a hold of my wife, and of course she was kind of giggling about it. And she said, I told you this wasn't a good idea. And I said, yeah, you're right. And so I got home a couple days later, and I lived in Connecticut. I lived kind of on a plateau. And the reason I bought the house is because the driveway was gravel, and it didn't even have a sign on it. It was a walnut lane, and it was nailed a board on a tree, and the board had come off the tree, so that even made it better. And then you had to go up about a half a mile up to the house, and there you were. And when I got up there was a Winnebago up there. How they got up there, I have no idea. And so when I got out of my car, 4 gentlemen came over and showed me that they were packing weapons, and they were ordered to walk the perimeter of my property 24/7, take my children to school, be with them all day, and take my wife to the supermarket or wherever she needed to go, and they were going to be with me on the road. And so I said, well, I don't know about the first 2 parts of it, but if you want to come with me, that's fine. So I went in, saw my wife, and of course she was a little bit upset that there was going to be security guards at the school and at the grocery store with her. And I said, well, I told them that's not going to happen. She said that you're right, that's not going to happen. So then it got to be where I had to go on into the airports, but I didn't go through the terminals. I would have a police car escort me to the bottom of the airplane. I would walk up the stairs of the plane, and they would check me out, check my bags, and let me on the airplane. And the same thing when I landed. I went down the stairs of the plane and got into a car. Police escorted me to the hotel or to the arena, whichever I needed to do. People would never really see me coming or going. And when it was time for me to wrestle, I was already dressed at the hotel, and they would come and get me and take me to the arena. And right before intermission, I would wrestle. During intermission, I would leave the building and go either back to the hotel or back to the airport. And off I went. So that's the way we kind of lived it for a while. And that went on, and we did everything we wanted to do. Vince told me just do whatever I thought I should do to stir up the pot a little bit, and if I got too far over the line, he would just pull me back. So I used to do crazy things. When it was Saddam Hussein's birthday, I would get a birthday cake and take it out to the rink and have people join me in singing happy birthday to Saddam Hussein, and used to ask the people to stand up and give 10 seconds of silence to all the brave Iraqi soldiers who...
Sarge?
Hello.
Hello. So sorry we got disconnected there.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries. So, yeah, it sounds like he really did care about you and your family. That's awesome.
Yeah, sure did.
And then, of course, the main reason why we got you on the show today is SuperCon, and you're going to be at that this weekend. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we'll be in there tomorrow, Friday night. I guess Friday afternoon from starting about 3 o'clock. I will be there signing autographs, taking pictures, and putting on Cobra clutches. So it'll be a good time if you want to get your G.I. Joe, Sgt Slaughter, and WWE memorabilia autographed. Take some pictures, put you in the Cobra clutch, and be a good time of the year to do like a Christmas card and have the whole family in the Cobra clutch. I think that would be a fun day. And then we're going to be there on Saturday, starting at 10 o'clock, and Sunday at 10 o'clock at the Kentucky International Convention Center for the Louisville SuperCon. I've never been to it, but I've heard it's quite a great show, and there's going to be other lots of celebrities and from all types of sporting events and cartoons and animations and TV shows and movies. Be a lot of fun.
Exactly. I mean, that's why you are the ideal person for this event, because they have, a mixture, like you said, of people, legends from the comic book world and the cartoon world, and then, of course, wrestling legends like yourself and Jerry Lawler and Booker T and Scott Steiner and all kinds of...
oh, wow.
Yeah,
that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
That's just going to be fun for me to see those guys.
Exactly. So for you guys, it's kind of like a nice family reunion to an extent.
Yes, it is. Usually, WrestleMania is a Hall of Fame is where we get to see everybody. Once a year. If we don't see them at some of these SuperCons and WrestleCons and Comic Cons, so it's always a fun time, and we get to get a few minutes where we can break away and say hello to each other, see how everybody's doing, and it's a lot of fun.
Excellent. If fans are wanting to follow you on social media and the web, where's the best place for them to keep track of you?
Well, I'm on. I don't do a whole lot of that, but if you go to SrgtSlaughter.com, you'll find me pretty much everywhere on social media, and I do have sometimes when I can return tweets and when I'm not driving a car or up on an airplane. So we try to keep up with our fans, and there's so many great loyal fans out there. And we just want them to know that if they're in the Louisville area, this is a great time because Sgt Slaughter doesn't do many of these, and that it would be a good weekend to come on by and say hello. And as I said, get your Sgt Slaughter G.I. Joe and WWE memorabilia signed and talk. And it's fun to see where everybody comes from. How far they travel to come and see you. And it's a great time, really good time.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarge.
Yes.